Hello everyone, welcome to the Adkup Show. So India and Pakistan are on the verge of a war. But there's one question which is important to ask, especially from Pakistan's side. Can Pakistan afford a war with India? With tensions skyrocketing after the devastating Pahalgam terror attack in April 2025, the specter of conflict looms large. But beyond the rhetoric, what does Pakistan's economy tells us about its ability to sustain a war against a much larger neighbor, and what's driving this escalation? In this video, I'll talk about Pakistan's economic realities like GDP, reserves, debt, defense spending, and more, while unpacking the geopolitical fallout of the recent terror attack. So without wasting time, let's get started. Before we dive into the economics, let's talk about what's brought us to this point, the Pahalgam terror attack on April 22nd, 2025. So, in the town of Pahalgam, Jammu and Kashmir, a coordinated terrorist attack targeted Indian security forces and civilians. The attack killed 26 people, which included 8 soldiers, and injured dozens more. This number might increase in the future. Indian authorities quickly pointed the finger at Pakistan-based terrorist group, specifically Lashkar-e-Toiba, alleging cross-border infiltration. Pakistan's government condemned the attack but denied any involvement and called for a joint investigation. India's response was swift and pretty much uncompromising. On April 24, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, a 1960 agreement critical to Pakistan's water supply. And then he closed the Attari-Wagah border, and he also downgraded the diplomatic ties. The Pakistan Stock Exchange crashed 2,500 points in a single day, signaling economic panic. This isn't the first time a terror attack has pushed India and Pakistan to the brink. Think Pulwama in 2019 or Mumbai in 2008. But the stakes feel higher now, and it looks like something has changed. India's aggressive diplomatic moves and Pakistan's defiant rhetoric. So let's ask this question. Can Pakistan's economy handle a war if tensions boil over? To answer this question of whether Pakistan's economy can sustain a war or not, we need to look at Pakistan's economy in 2025. And trust me, it's full of vulnerabilities. Let's break it down across key parameters. First up, GDP. Pakistan's economy is worth about $300 to $376 billion depending on estimates. Basically, it's unorganized and there's not enough data to calculate the exact numbers. That's roughly 1/10 the size of India's almost $4 trillion economy. In the 1960s, Pakistan was a growth star, averaging 6.7% annually. But political instability, military rule, and economic mismanagement have slowed things down. It's a decade after decade decline, and now everything is accelerating. In 2023, Pakistan's GDP actually shrank due to the post-COVID crisis and global commodity price spikes from Russia-Ukraine war. By 2025, growth is crawling at 2.5 to 2.6% according to the IMF and Asian Development Bank. And it's actually not a good growth. Compare that to India's 6.7% growth and you will see the gap. Low growth means less money for everything, especially war. Next is foreign exchange reserves. That's a cash which Pakistan has to pay for imports like fuel, food, or weapons. As of 2025, Pakistan's reserves are at $7 to $8 billion, and most of that doesn't belong to Pakistan. Basically, countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE gave them that money just to show and get some loan from wherever it's possible. In June 2023, reserves hit a low of $3.7 billion, barely covering 2 weeks of imports. Don't forget that Pakistan's population is almost 250 million. Pakistan owes 15 to 20 billion dollars a year in debt repayment through 2030. It's being saved by IMF bailouts like a $3 billion package in 2023 and loaned from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and China. A war would spike import costs, especially for defense equipment, and could drain reserves in weeks. Now, inflation. In May 2023, Pakistan's inflation hit a staggering 38.5%, one of the highest globally. This happened because of a weak rupee, 138 to the dollar back then, which made imports like fuel and food insanely expensive. By 2025, inflation is down to 4.1%, but the damage lingers. By the way, Pakistan has freezed its currency since the last 2 years. You can see the straight line here without any fluctuation since the late 2023. With 36% of Pakistan's population under 15, families are stretched thin. A war would mean diverting funds from subsidies or social programs, driving up prices and hardship, and this could lead to socio-political unrest, which is pretty much happening as you watch this video. Now here's where it gets grim. Debt. Pakistan's debt-to-GDP ratio is 70%. That's among the highest in the region. In 2023, 40 to 50% of government revenue went to debt servicing, that is paying interest, and that doesn't include the principal. Tax collection is minimal, with Pakistan ranking among the world's worst. The IMF is trying to help with a new extended fund facility, but it's a tightrope. Diverting funds to war would mean defaulting on loans or slashing social spending, both of which could spike unrest. Now the military. Pakistan spends $7.6 to $11.8 billion a year on defense. That's 60 to 70% of its budget, which is massive for a struggling economy. India, by contrast, spends around $86 billion. But here's the kicker. Pakistan imports nearly 100% of its defense equipment, costing $3 to $5 billion in a short war. With reserves at $7 to $8 billion, that's a huge hit. Plus, high military spending has starved education and healthcare, leaving Pakistan 149th out of 186th on the Human Development Index. One of Pakistan's biggest vulnerabilities is water. Agriculture makes up 22.7% of GDP and employs 37.4% of the workforce. Now, that's an official number, but in reality, it's way big. Pakistan is completely an agrarian economy which has no industrial base. The Indus Waters Treaty allocates the Indus and Chenab rivers to Pakistan, irrigating 90% of its crops. And guess what? India has suspended that treaty, which could be a game changer after a terrorist attack. This means that there will be no data sharing and no cooperation. If India builds infrastructure to divert water, it could devastate Pakistan's crops, spike food price, and tank the economy. India knows this. It's economic warfare without firing a shot. Trade is another weak spot. Pakistan's trade deficit was $31.2 billion in 2023. And foreign investment is now low due to restrictive policies. Trade with India was negligible at $2.4 billion, and India's 200% duties and MFN revocation since 2019 hurt Pakistan's exporters. A war would halt trade, scare off investors, and widen the deficit, pushing Pakistan closer to economic collapse. This looks inevitable. Nobody invests in Pakistan. Finally, the people. Pakistan is fifth largest population globally with 64% under 30. That's a potential economic boost, but 36% are under 15, which increases the dependency ratio. Stunting affects 40% of kids, and 2/3 of the school-age children face learning deprivation. War would pull resources from schools and hospitals, deepening poverty and unrest. A young, frustrated population could be a powder keg. So let's put it all together. Can Pakistan afford a war with India? And the short answer is no. And here's why. A limited war could cost $3 to $5 billion, mostly for imported weapons and fuel. With reserves at $7 to $8 billion, Pakistan might manage 10 days of fighting, but a prolonged conflict would completely destroy its economy. Diverting funds would spike inflation, crash the rupee, and risk default. In 2023, Pakistan was hours from bankruptcy before the IMF bailout. War would push it over the edge. Plus, IMF and allies like Saudi Arabia might pull funding if Pakistan escalates. Militarily, Pakistan has around 650,000 active personnel and a nuclear arsenal, but India has more than 1.6 million troops, air dominance, and lot of advanced tech. Pakistan's quid pro quo plus nuclear policy risks rapid escalation, which neither sides want. Now here's the thing. Pakistan might look strong enough to put up a fight, but that's only on paper. How much military power is at its disposal is yet to be seen. Past wars like 1965, 1971, or Kargil in 1999 left Pakistan economically weaker and diplomatically isolated. History is not on their side. Plus, I have said earlier that something has changed. Geopolitically, Pakistan is in a tough spot. India's global clout, like with the US and Russia, overshadows Pakistan's reliance on China. The China-Pakistan economic corridor is a lifeline, but Beijing is more focused on protecting its $60 billion investments than fighting India. Domestically, political chaos like arresting Imran Khan and insurgency in Balochistan could explode if war diverts resources. The stock market crashed 2% post Pahalgam shows how jittery Pakistan is. The Indus Waters Treaty suspension is India's trump card. Disrupting Pakistan's water supply could cripple agriculture, which supports 22.7% of GDP officially. Food shortages, higher prices, and rural unrest would make war unsustainable. Pakistan called it an act of war, but it's got very few options to retaliate. India is not invincible. War would strain its budget too, but with almost $4 trillion economy, over $688 billion of reserves, and massive defense spending gives it breathing room. Pakistan's economy, which is barely recovering from 2023, has none. So where do we go from here? War is losing game for Pakistan. Its economy can't sustain it and the human cost would be devastating. India's water leverage and military edge makes escalation a risky bet. The best path forward is de-escalation, but India doesn't want that. Back-channel talks, confidence-building measures, or even reviving the Indus Waters Treaty could cool tensions. Pakistan needs to focus on stabilizing its economy, boosting growth, cutting debt, and investing in its youth. So that's it for today's deep dive. The Pahalgam terrorist attack has pushed India and Pakistan to the brink. But economics tells us war is a dead end for Pakistan. So what do you think? Can diplomacy save the day, or are we headed for a conflict? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more global breakdowns. Until next time, stay curious. Peace out.